Welcome, my soft-thinking listener. You've found yourself in the company of the Sleepy Sloth once again. A slow, scientifically minded fellow who enjoys mountains, glaciers, and the quietly unremarkable processes that shape them. I must tell you something before we begin. Today, I consider myself a scientist wannabe in the subtle and very gradual art of the gentle birth of the Ganga and the glaciers of Uttarakhand. A scientist who is almost always correct, except for those few times when I am not. But even then, I prefer to drift gently onward, rather than fuss over it. Because what truly matters is the information itself. Before I start, please, let me know. What is the most boring thing you would secretly love hearing about? Let me know gently in the comments. Now, let us begin today's episode of Whispers of Ice, the Himalayan Awakening. The Himalayan mountains, which cradle the glaciers of Uttarakhand, did not appear suddenly, like a startled rabbit, but rather, ever so slowly, over tens of millions of years. As the Indian tectonic plate inched northwards and collided with the Eurasian plate. This process, called continental collision, caused layers upon layers of sedimentary rock to crumple, fold, and, eventually, rise into the forms that we now call mountains. Let us float gently onward, to consider that this collision is ongoing, at a rate of a few centimeters per year, which is barely noticeable, except to geologists who measure these things with painstakingly precise instruments. The rocks themselves are composed of myriad minerals, quartz, feldspar, mica, each contributing its own subtle hue to the landscape, though you may not notice these colors unless you look very, very closely. And even then, perhaps only in passing. Snow began to settle on the higher peaks, compacting into ice over millennia, forming glaciers like the Gangotri Glacier, which, despite being one of the most famous glaciers, is still slow, moving only a few meters per day. This slow creep carries with it bits of rock and sediment, a process called glacial plucking, which carves valleys over eons. Not hours, not days, but eons. A reminder that nature prefers patience to urgency. The high Himalayas, in their quiet, stoic presence, provide a cooling influence on the surrounding atmosphere, creating microclimates where moss, lichens, and hardy alpine plants slowly cling and flourish, inch by inch, season by season. While the ice whispers downward, a barely perceptible sigh across the slopes, sculpting the earth. Ever so gently, ever so slowly, in ways that almost no one notices. And so the Himalayas awaken. Though not with noise or sudden flash, but with the unending, nearly imperceptible shuffling of rock, snow, and ice. The mountains grow. The glaciers form. And the river that will become the Ganga is quietly gestated in this soft, cold cradle. You may not care. And that is completely fine. Because the mountains themselves do not rush. They do not worry. They simply continue, in their own methodical, patient, unexciting rhythm. Which is precisely what makes it so soothing. Let us drift even more gently to imagine the tiny fractures in the rocks, formed by freeze-thaw cycles that repeat hundreds of times each year, expanding imperceptibly, adding their minute contributions to the grand shaping of valleys. Snowflakes, each unique in pattern and nearly imperceptible in their individual forms, accumulate and compact slowly, their crystalline edges refracting the faint sunlight and casting barely noticeable glimmers across ice fields that will take centuries to move even a single kilometer. And let us not forget the wind, so soft, so indifferent, brushing the peaks, shifting loose particles of snow, shaping cornices that will eventually tumble, leaving faint traces in the long, patient march of glacial evolution. Every tiny trickle of meltwater, every glacial moraine, every pebble transported, it all matters. In a manner so subtle that it is almost impossible to perceive without prolonged observation. Yet the Himalayas continue, quietly accumulating, eroding, freezing, and thawing, a cycle so prolonged that human lifetimes are mere blinks in comparison. And that is entirely, perfectly soothing. The Gangotri Glacier, nestled in the Garhwal Himalayas of Uttarakhand, India, is a valley-tide glacier, meaning it flows within a valley, much like a river of ice. This glacier is fed by snow and ice accumulated over millennia, a process so slow that it is nearly imperceptible to the human eye. The accumulation zone, where snow and ice gather, is located at higher elevations, where temperatures are low enough to allow snow to persist year-round. Snowfall in this region is primarily influenced by western disturbances, which bring moisture-laden winds from the Mediterranean, resulting in snowfall during the winter months. These disturbances occur approximately 10 to 15 times each winter, depositing snow that gradually compacts into firn and eventually into glacial ice. The accumulation of snow is a delicate balance. If snowfall is insufficient, the glacier cannot maintain its mass, leading to retreat. Conversely, excessive snowfall can lead to an increase in glacier size, though such events are rare and fleeting. The Gangotri Glacier, with its vast expanse and intricate dynamics, serves as a testament to the slow and steady forces of nature that shape our world. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of the Gangotri Glacier, let us consider the various tributary glaciers that feed into it. These smaller glaciers, such as the Rakvarn, Chacharangi, and Kirti glaciers, contribute to the overall mass and flow of the Gangotri Glacier. Each of these tributaries has its own unique characteristics and dynamics, influenced by factors such as elevation, slope, and exposure to sunlight. The interplay between these tributary glaciers and the main Gangotri Glacier is a complex dance, with each influencing the other in subtle ways. The Rakvarn Glacier, for instance, is known for its reddish hue, a result of the presence of iron-rich minerals in the bedrock. The Chacharangi Glacier, named for its four-pronged shape, is a confluence of several smaller glaciers, each contributing to its unique structure. The Kirti Glacier, on the other hand, is characterized by its steep slopes and rapid flow, making it one of the more dynamic tributaries. Together, these tributary glaciers form a network of ice flows that feed into the Gangotri Glacier, contributing to its size and movement. The dynamics of the Gangotri Glacier are influenced by a multitude of factors, including temperature, precipitation, and the physical characteristics of the terrain. The glacier's movement is primarily driven by the force of gravity, causing the ice to flow downhill. This movement is not uniform, it varies across the glacier's surface and depth. The upper reaches of the glacier, where the ice is thicker, move more slowly, while the lower reaches, where the ice is thinner, move more rapidly. This differential movement leads to the formation of crevasses, deep cracks in the ice that can be several meters wide and hundreds of meters long. These crevasses are a natural part of the glacier's dynamics, allowing for the redistribution of ice and the accommodation of stresses within the glacier. The presence of crevasses also contributes to the glacier's surface features, adding to the complexity and beauty of the glacier's landscape. In addition to crevasses, the Gangotri Glacier exhibits other surface features that reflect its dynamic nature. Superglacial lakes, formed by the melting of ice on the glacier's surface, dot the landscape, their turquoise waters contrasting with the white ice. These lakes are temporary features, subject to the fluctuating temperatures and melting rates of the glacier. The presence of these lakes indicates areas of intense melting, where the ice is thinning and retreating. The formation and eventual drainage of these lakes can have significant impacts on the glacier's mass balance, influencing its overall health and stability. The study of these surface features provides valuable insights into the glacier's behavior and the broader climatic conditions affecting it. As we continue our exploration of the Gangotri Glacier, let us consider the broader implications of its dynamics. The glacier's behavior is not isolated, it is part of a larger system that includes the surrounding environment and human activities. The meltwater from the glacier feeds into the Bhagirathi River, a major tributary of the Ganges. This river provides water for irrigation, drinking, and religious purposes for millions of people in the region. Changes in the glacier's mass balance, such as increased melting or reduced accumulation, can affect the flow of the river, leading to potential water shortages or flooding. Understanding the dynamics of the Gangotri Glacier is therefore crucial for managing water resources and planning for future climate scenarios. The study of glaciers, particularly those like the Gangotri Glacier, is a delicate endeavor. Researchers must navigate the challenges posed by the harsh and remote environment, where access is limited and conditions are unpredictable. Despite these challenges, scientists continue to monitor and study the glacier, employing a variety of methods to gather data. Remote sensing technologies, such as satellite imagery and drones, allow for the collection of data without direct contact, providing a comprehensive view of the glacier's dynamics. Ground-based observations, though more challenging, offer detailed insights into specific areas of interest. The combination of these methods provides a holistic understanding of the glacier's behavior, contributing to the broader field of glaciology. The Gangotri Glacier, with its intricate dynamics and profound significance, serves as a reminder of the slow and steady forces that shape our planet. Its formation, influenced by factors such as snowfall, temperature, and terrain, is a testament to the delicate balance of nature. The interactions between the glacier and its tributaries, the formation of surface features, and the broader implications for the surrounding environment all contribute to the glacier's complex nature. As we continue to study and understand these processes, we gain a deeper appreciation for the subtle and often unnoticed forces that shape our world. You may not care. And that is completely fine. Because the glacier itself does not rush. It does not worry. It simply continues, in its own methodical, patient, unexciting rhythm. Which is precisely what makes it so soothing. Gomukh, also known as Gaumukh, is the terminus of the Gangotri Glacier and the source of the Bhagirathi River, one of the primary headstreams of the Ganges. Situated at an elevation of approximately 4,023 meters, 13,200 feet, in the Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand, India, Gomukh is a sacred site for Hindus and a popular trekking destination. The name Gaumukh translates to mouth of a cow, a reference to the glacier's snout, which resembles the open mouth of a cow. The glacier's terminus is a dynamic and evolving feature, shaped by the interplay of ice, water, and rock over millennia. The Bhagirathi River originates from the snout of the Gangotri Glacier, where meltwater emerges from beneath the ice. This water flows through a narrow crevasse in the glacier, emerging as a stream that begins its journey toward the plains of India. The river's course is influenced by the glacier's movement and the surrounding topography, carving its path through the rugged Himalayan landscape. As the glacier retreats due to climatic changes, the dynamics of water flow and sediment transport at the terminus continue to evolve, impacting the morphology of the river's source. The surrounding environment of Gomukh is characterized by alpine meadows, rocky outcrops, and a stark, glacial landscape. Vegetation is sparse due to the high altitude and harsh conditions, but hardy species such as mosses, lichens, and alpine grasses can be found. The area is also home to various wildlife, including the Himalayan tahr, musk deer, and snow leopard, which inhabit the Gangotri National Park. The park's diverse ecosystems range from coniferous forests at lower elevations to alpine meadows and glaciers at higher elevations, providing a sanctuary for these species. Reaching Gomukh involves a trek from the town of Gangotri, approximately 18 kilometers away. The trail passes through several notable points, including Churbasa, Bhojvasa, and Hilapahar, each offering unique views and experiences. The journey is challenging, with steep ascents and descents, rocky terrain, and varying weather conditions. Trekking permits are required, and the area is typically accessible from May to October, with the winter months being inhospitable due to heavy snowfall. The significance of Gomukh extends beyond its physical attributes. In Hindu mythology, the Ganges is believed to have descended from the heavens to earth to purify the souls of King Bhagiratha's ancestors. The river's descent was facilitated by Lord Shiva, who contained the mighty flow in his matted locks before releasing it onto the earth. This mythological narrative underscores the sacredness of the Bhagirathi River and, by extension, Gomukh as its source. Over the years, Gomukh has been a site of pilgrimage and spiritual reflection. Devotees undertake the arduous trek to reach the glacier's snout, where they perform rituals and seek blessings. The serene and pristine environment of Gomukh provides a setting for introspection and connection with the divine. The journey itself is considered a spiritual endeavor, with each step symbolizing a progression toward purification and enlightenment. However, the region faces environmental challenges. The Gangotri Glacier, like many others worldwide, is retreating due to climate change. This retreat affects the volume and flow of meltwater, potentially impacting the Bhagirathi River's discharge and the ecosystems dependent on it. Monitoring and understanding these changes are crucial for preserving the glacier's integrity and the livelihoods of those who rely on the river. Gomukh stands as a testament to the intricate relationship between nature, culture, and spirituality. Its status as the source of the Bhagirathi River imbues it with both physical and symbolic significance. As a dynamic glacial terminus, it continues to evolve, shaped by natural forces and human interactions. The journey to Gomukh is not just a physical trek but a passage through the layers of history, mythology, and environmental change, offering a profound experience for those who embark upon it. Tapovan. A name that dances softly on the tongue, like the gentle rustling of leaves in a breeze that you can barely feel. Nestled at an elevation of approximately 4,450 meters, 14,600 feet, Tapovan is a vast alpine meadow, or bugule, situated in the Gangotri region of Uttarakhand, India. This serene expanse lies at the base of the majestic Shivling Peak, its towering presence a silent sentinel over the meadows. The journey to Tapovan often begins at Gangotri, meandering through the dense forests of Churbasa and Bojwasa, before emerging into the open, where the land stretches wide and the sky feels closer. The trek is not merely a physical journey but a gradual immersion into a world where time seems to slow, and every step is accompanied by the whisper of the wind and the murmur of distant streams. As one approaches Tapovan, the landscape transforms. The dense forests give way to expansive meadows, carpeted with a rich tapestry of alpine flora. These meadows are adorned with a variety of wildflowers, their vibrant colors contrasting beautifully with the surrounding greenery. Species such as the Brahma Kamal, a rare and sacred flower, and the blue poppy, with its delicate petals, add splashes of color to the landscape. The flora here is not just a visual delight but also a testament to the resilience of life in high-altitude environments. Each plant, rooted in the rocky soil, stands as a quiet testament to the enduring spirit of nature. The meadows of Tapovan are not just a feast for the eyes but also a sanctuary for a variety of wildlife. The region is home to several species adapted to the high-altitude environment. Himalayan tahr, with its distinctive curved horns, can be spotted grazing on the slopes. Musk deer, elusive and solitary, move silently through the underbrush. The skies above are often graced by the presence of the Himalayan griffon vulture, its broad wings soaring gracefully in the thin mountain air. These creatures, though often seen in fleeting glimpses, contribute to the rich tapestry of life that defines Tapovan. Streams meander through the meadows, their crystal-clear waters originating from the melting glaciers above. One such stream is the unhurried Ganga, or nectar of the Ganges, which flows gently into the glacier. Its waters, pure and cold, add a melodic hum to the otherwise tranquil surroundings. The sound of water trickling over stones, combined with the rustling of the alpine grasses, creates a symphony that soothes the soul and calms the mind. The skies above Tapovan are often a canvas of changing hues. During the day, the sun casts its golden light over the meadows, making the wildflowers shimmer and the grasses sway gently. As evening approaches, the sky transforms into a palette of soft pinks and purples, with the setting sun casting long shadows over the landscape. Nightfall brings with it a blanket of stars, the Milky Way stretching across the heavens in a silent display of cosmic wonder. The air in Topovann is crisp and pure, each breath a refreshing sip of mountain essence. The thin atmosphere at this altitude makes every inhalation feel more profound, as if the very act of breathing is a connection to the earth and sky. The stillness of the environment amplifies the sounds of nature, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of a leaf, the murmur of a stream, each sound a note in the symphony of the highlands. The flora and fauna of Topovann are not just biological entities but are deeply intertwined with the cultural and spiritual fabric of the region. The Brahma Kamal, for instance, is considered sacred and is often associated with spiritual awakening. Local traditions and beliefs imbue the landscape with layers of meaning, turning the meadows into a living tapestry of faith and nature. The presence of these plants and animals serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between human culture and the natural world. However, this delicate balance is under threat. Climate change poses a significant challenge to the alpine ecosystems of Topovann. Rising temperatures can lead to the melting of glaciers, altering the flow of streams and affecting the flora and fauna that depend on these water sources. Additionally, increased human activity can lead to habitat degradation and loss of biodiversity. Conservation efforts are essential to preserve the unique ecological heritage of Topovann, ensuring that future generations can experience its serene beauty. The journey to Topovann is more than a physical trek, it is a passage into a realm where time slows, and the soul finds solace. The meadows, with their vibrant flora and diverse fauna, offer a glimpse into the resilience and beauty of life at high altitudes. The streams, the skies, and the stillness all contribute to an environment that nurtures reflection and connection. In Topovann, nature speaks in whispers, inviting those who venture there to listen, to observe, and to be present in the moment. In the quiet expanse of Topovann, amidst the alpine meadows and under the vast sky, one is reminded of the simplicity and profundity of nature. Here, amidst the wildflowers and the whispering winds, the world feels both vast and intimate. Each blade of grass, each fluttering leaf, each distant peak contributes to the rich tapestry that is Topovann. It is a place where the spirit finds peace, and the heart finds home. In the high, quiet corners of the Garhwal Himalayas, where the air is thin and the earth speaks in whispers, the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda valleys unfold like ancient scrolls, their stories etched in stone and water. These valleys, carved by the patient hands of time, are more than mere geographical features, they are living chronicles of the earth's slow, deliberate dance. The Bhagirathi Valley, with its deep gorges and towering cliffs, is a testament to the relentless power of tectonic forces. The river, originating from the Gangotri Glacier, has, over millennia, carved its path through the rugged terrain, creating a landscape that is both awe-inspiring and humbling. The valley's geology is complex, with layers of metamorphic rocks and granite intrusions that tell tales of ancient seas and shifting continents. These formations, some dating back to the Precambrian era, have been folded and faulted by the immense pressures of the Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate, a process that continues to this day. Similarly, the Alaknanda Valley, stretching from the confluence of the Satopanth and Bajarath-Karak glaciers to the confluence with the Bhagirathi at Defprayag, showcases the intricate interplay of geological forces. The valley is flanked by steep slopes composed of schists, gneisses, and quartzites, remnants of the ancient Tethyan sediments that once lay beneath the ocean. These rocks have been thrust upwards along the main central thrust, a major fault line that marks the boundary between the Lesser and Greater Himalayas. The river meanders through this terrain, its waters carving out terraces and shaping the landscape with a grace that belies the power beneath. As the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda rivers converge at Defprayag, they form the Ganges, a river that carries with it the stories of these valleys. The confluence is not just a meeting of waters but a union of histories, where the ancient past flows into the present, carrying with it the essence of the Himalayas. The surrounding valleys, with their rich biodiversity and serene landscapes, offer a glimpse into a world where nature's rhythms are unhurried, and time seems to stand still. In these valleys, the slow processes of erosion and sedimentation are evident in the terraces that line the riverbanks. These terraces, formed over thousands of years, are like pages in a book, each one recording a chapter in the valley's history. The layers of soil and rock tell stories of climatic shifts, of monsoons that have come and gone, and of the steady hand of the river that has shaped the land. The flora and fauna of the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda valleys are equally reflective of the patience of nature. Alpine meadows, dotted with wildflowers, stretch across the landscape, providing sustenance to grazing animals and shelter to a variety of birds. The forests, rich in biodiversity, are home to species that have adapted to the harsh conditions, their presence a testament to the resilience of life. Human settlements in these valleys are few and far between, their existence a delicate balance with the surrounding environment. Villages like Harsil and Mana are nestled within the folds of the landscape, their inhabitants living in harmony with the land, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of nature. The people here have a deep connection to the land, their traditions and practices shaped by the environment in which they live. The slow, deliberate processes that have shaped the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda valleys continue to this day. Tectonic movements, erosion, and sediment deposition are ongoing, ensuring that the landscape remains dynamic and ever-changing. These processes, though imperceptible in the short term, have a profound impact over millennia, continually reshaping the valleys and the life within them. In the quiet corners of the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda valleys, time unfolds at its own pace. Here, the rush of the world fades away, and the slow, patient rhythms of nature take center stage. It is a place where the land tells its stories, where the rivers sing their songs, and where the spirit finds peace in the embrace of the Himalayas. Ah, the Panchprayag, where rivers meet and intertwine in a choreography so slow, so deliberate, that only the patient eye can truly observe the subtle shaping of earth, water, and human reverence. The first of these confluences, Vishnuprag, is where the Alaknanda greets the Dhala Ganga. Here, the waters merge quietly, their temperatures, mineral compositions, and flow velocities differing just enough to create subtle eddies and currents, a gentle reminder that even nature's union is measured and meticulous. The rocks lining the riverbeds tell stories of eons, their surfaces smoothed by countless centuries of water, glacial silt, and occasional rockfall. The valley itself rises steeply on either side, with cliffs sculpted by slow erosion, showcasing bands of schist, gneiss, and quartzite that speak of ancient seas and continental collisions. The villagers nearby have long recognized the sacredness of this juncture, offering prayers and observing rituals that have been carried forward, almost unchanged, for generations, as though they too move in synchrony with the patient rhythm of the rivers. At Nanprag, the confluence of the Alaknanda and Nandakini rivers unfolds in a quieter, more secluded setting. Here, the waters of the Nandakini, originating from the glaciers near Nanda Devi, join the larger Alaknanda with barely a ripple at first glance, though the subtle interplay of currents, sediment load, and temperature gradients is constantly shaping miniature sandbars and underwater ledges. The surrounding slopes are covered with temperate forests of oak and pine, interspersed with rhododendron shrubs that bloom in muted reds and pinks. Moss and lichen cling to every available surface, capturing moisture from the river mist and creating an ecosystem that thrives slowly, inch by inch, season by season. The confluence itself has inspired local lore and pilgrimage routes, a testament to the way natural geography quietly guides human culture, shaping festivals, offerings, and the paths that travelers take to witness the sacred merging of waters. Moving onward to Karnaprag, where the Alaknanda meets the Pindar River, the valley widens gently, forming a landscape of terraces and alluvial fans. The Pindar, fed by the Pindari Glacier, carries fine glacial flour, tiny particles of rock ground by the slow movement of ice, that when deposited along the banks, creates subtle changes in soil fertility and vegetation patterns. These shifts, almost imperceptible over a single year, accumulate over centuries, creating microhabitats for grasses, shrubs, and small mammals. Monasteries and temples nearby are placed with careful attention to the landscape, not only to honor sacred traditions but also to respect the floodplain, which shifts slightly each monsoon. The careful observation and adaptation of human structures to these slow natural processes is another reminder that patience governs both geology and culture alike. At Rudraprayag, the Alaknanda receives the Mandakini River, and the merging occurs amidst a more dramatic topography. Steep hills descend abruptly into the confluence, with landslides and rockfalls leaving traces of the Earth's ongoing adjustments. The Mandakini, originating from the Korabari Glacier near Kedarnath, brings with it cold, silty waters, often slightly tinted with suspended glacial rock flour, giving the river a delicate milky blue hue. The Alaknanda, wider and more settled by this point, receives these waters with a gentle turbulence, forming ripples and miniature whirlpools. Human settlements cling to terraces, stone steps leading down to the water for ritual bathing and offerings. The air carries faint mineral aromas and the distant sound of cascading streams, creating a sensory environment that soothes the mind while reminding one of the precise balance between water, sediment, and stone. Deoprag, where the Alaknanda meets the Bhagirathi to officially become the Ganges, embodies the culmination of the Panch Prayag. Here, the Alaknanda's clearer waters merge with the darker, slightly warmer Bhagirathi, and the subtle contrast creates patterns on the water surface that shift with every gust of wind. The valley broadens just enough to accommodate both riverbanks, lined with temple complexes and pilgrimage paths that have guided travelers for centuries. The sediment load, carried from upstream glaciers and tributaries, deposits in layers along the banks, slowly creating natural levees that influence where vegetation can grow. Pilgrims immerse themselves in these waters, aware that the river's union carries not only minerals and sediments but also centuries of devotion and cultural memory. The Ganges emerges from this confluence as a river with enhanced volume and velocity, yet the transition is gentle, a quiet demonstration of hydrological patience and continuity. The ecological impact of the Panch Prayag cannot be overstated, for the confluences influence local climate, soil composition, and vegetation patterns. Each meeting of waters subtly alters the flow regime, nutrient dispersal, and erosion rates downstream. Fish species adapt to the mixed temperatures and sediment levels, while riverine plants find niches in the varying water velocities. The rhythmic rise and fall of water levels during monsoon seasons gently sculpts riverbanks, leaving behind deposits that nourish the next year's growth. Lichens, mosses, and hardy alpine plants colonize rocks along the edges, thriving in conditions that might seem inhospitable but are precisely those that this unique convergence creates. The Panch Prayag thus forms a network of microhabitats, a slow-motion laboratory of evolutionary adaptation, each confluence a site where water, stone, and life interact in quiet, meticulous choreography. Cultural landscapes intertwine seamlessly with these physical processes. Ancient texts and pilgrim accounts describe the confluences with reverence, noting the precise locations where waters meet, the color contrasts, and even the seasonal variations in flow. Rituals and festivals are timed according to the river rhythms, honoring the slow, predictable cycles that define the local ecology. Temples are constructed with stones quarried from nearby hills, aligned along the terraces in ways that subtly accommodate seasonal shifts in riverbanks, demonstrating a long history of human observation and adaptation to these patient, ceaselessly changing landscapes. Even pathways and steps are placed to allow for natural sediment deposition, acknowledging that water, like time itself, moves steadily, shaping the earth with quiet determination. Geologically, the Panch Prayag reveals the story of the Himalayas' uplift and the ongoing collision of the Indian and Eurasian plates. Each river cuts through rock layers differently, depending on gradient, sediment load, and the hardness of bedrock. The resulting valleys, gorges, and terraces provide subtle records of seismic activity, landslides, and glacial retreat over thousands of years. River bends, point bars, and meanders form slowly, tracing patterns that are almost imperceptible in a single human lifetime, yet over centuries, they define the landscapes we see today. Even boulders and pebbles along the banks carry a history of upstream origins, tumbling down with the flow and eventually resting in quiet repose, whispering stories of high-altitude glaciers, snowmelt, and gravity's gentle pull. The sensory environment around the Panch Prayag is as nuanced as the physical and cultural landscapes themselves. The soundscape is dominated by flowing water, a continuous murmur that varies in timbre depending on seasonal volume and channel structure. Occasionally, waterfalls from tributary streams create short-lived crescendos, quickly returning to the gentle, persistent lull of river flow. The air is rich with minerals carried from glaciers and soils upstream, mixed with fragrances from alpine flora and riparian forests. Temperature and humidity vary subtly along the confluences, creating microclimates where moss, ferns, and shrubs thrive. Observing these patterns requires patience, a quiet attention to detail, and a willingness to notice small shifts that most people might overlook in their rush. Human perception of the Panch Prayag has always been shaped by this slow, unfolding natural rhythm. Pilgrims, trekkers, and villagers alike come to witness the waters merging, often finding solace not only in the spiritual significance but also in the sheer, unhurried presence of geological time made visible. The confluences demonstrate that monumental change need not be loud, it can be the patient, continuous work of water over stone, of glacial melt shaping valleys, of sediment deposition quietly raising riverbanks. By observing these processes, one gains a sense of humility, an awareness that both nature and human life are best understood when experienced slowly, attentively, without urgency, in alignment with the patient pulse of the earth. The Panch Prayag exemplifies how sacred geography and natural processes are intertwined, each informing and shaping the other over thousands of years. These river confluences are living laboratories of hydrology, geology, ecology, and culture, where the flow of water mirrors the flow of time, sediment, and human devotion. To be present at these confluences is to witness the extraordinary patience of rivers and mountains, to observe how the slow and subtle interactions of stone, water, and life shape landscapes, inform rituals, and inspire reverence. The Panch Prayag, in its quiet persistence, reminds us that nature's most profound transformations are rarely sudden, and that the most sacred of places are often the slowest to form. At Dev Prayag, the gentle meeting of the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda rivers unfolds like a quiet ceremony that has been taking place for countless centuries. Here, the waters of the Bhagirathi, cold and silvery from their glacial origins at Galmuk, approach from the northwest, carrying with them the faint scent of minerals and the occasional flake of glacial silt. The Alaknanda, broader and somewhat warmer, arrives from the northeast, gathering waters from multiple tributaries, each with its own subtle character, sediment load, and rhythm. The confluence itself forms an elegant, swirling junction, where the currents dance in a slow, hypnotic pattern that shifts with every whisper of the wind and every subtle rise in seasonal flow. The rocks lining the riverbed bear the marks of centuries of water, smoothed edges telling stories of erosion so gradual that only time itself could witness it. Along the banks, terraces rise in gentle steps, created over millennia by the patient deposition of silt and alluvium. These terraces are home to mosses, lichens, and small shrubs that cling to life in these moist, shifting soils. The vegetation is not only decorative but functional, stabilizing the banks, reducing erosion, and providing habitat for birds, insects, and small mammals. Riverine trees such as willows and alders find niches along the edges, their roots submerged in the slowly churning waters. The interplay between water and plant life is an intricate dialogue, each influencing the other in patterns that are almost imperceptible on a daily scale but monumental over centuries. The human presence at Dev Prayag mirrors this natural patience. Pilgrims gather at the sacred confluence, performing rituals with soft, deliberate movements. The steps leading down to the water are worn smooth by countless generations of feet, their surfaces telling the story of devotion, reverence, and continuity. Temples rise modestly above the banks, their stone walls reflecting both the light and the river's gentle current. The architecture accommodates seasonal flooding, terraces, and sediment shifts, a subtle acknowledgement that the river dictates the terms of its own environment. In the quiet of early morning, the combined river emits barely a sound beyond the gentle rush of water over stones and the occasional flutter of leaves in the breeze. Observing the Ganga's birth at Devprayag offers insight into the hydrology of the region. The merging of two rivers with distinct flow regimes creates patterns of turbulence, sediment sorting, and channeling that vary by season. During the summer melt, the flow increases dramatically, carrying with it glacial sediments, tiny stones, and organic matter. In winter, the waters calm, moving more slowly, allowing fine silt to settle along the riverbed. These rhythms, dictated by snowmelt, rainfall, and upstream tributaries, have been shaping the confluence for thousands of years, producing subtle, unhurried modifications in the landscape. The geology of Devprayag contributes to the river's character in equally slow and fascinating ways. Steep slopes of metamorphic rocks, including schists, gneisses, and quartzites, flank the confluence. These rocks have been thrust upward during the ongoing collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. Over centuries, the rivers have carved channels, cut terraces, and exposed strata that reveal ancient geological histories. Observing these formations is like reading an unreadable diary, each layer a page of eons, folded and faulted in a language of stone. Boulders that have tumbled into the water carry faint scratches and striations from their time in upstream glaciers, slowly rotating and grinding with the flow, contributing to the river's quiet song. The sensory atmosphere at Devprayag is gentle and layered. The air carries a faint mineral scent from upstream glaciers, mingled with the earthy aroma of riverbank vegetation. Light refracts off the water in shifting patterns, creating subtle glimmers on the rocks, which change as the sun climbs and dips throughout the day. Occasional gusts of wind stir the surface, sending ripples across the river, barely disturbing the hypnotic swirl at the confluence. Birds flit along the edges, sometimes landing to drink or forage, their quiet movements integrated into the overall stillness. The experience is immersive, inviting slow attention and quiet reflection. Hydrologically, the confluence at Devprayag is a masterclass in equilibrium. The combined volume of the Ganga is influenced by the timing of snowmelt, seasonal rainfall, and upstream tributary input. Even the mixing of the waters occurs over several meters downstream, producing subtle changes in temperature, flow velocity, and turbidity. These variations shape habitats for aquatic plants and fish species, some adapted to fast-flowing, oxygen-rich currents, others to slower, silt-laden pools. The river's health and biodiversity are directly connected to these patient, ongoing natural processes, which unfold far more slowly than a human lifetime can easily perceive. Cultural dimensions of Devprayag are deeply intertwined with these hydrological and geological processes. Religious rituals, festivals, and pilgrimages are timed to seasonal water levels, demonstrating an understanding, cultivated over centuries, of the river's steady pulse. Local myths describe the confluence as a sacred meeting point of energies, yet even these stories echo the slow pace of nature. The river shapes the land shapes human practice, and human practice quietly acknowledges the river's rhythms. Even the positioning of temples and steps demonstrates subtle adaptation to annual sediment deposition and seasonal fluctuations, ensuring harmony rather than conflict with the water. The confluence is also a classroom for those who study erosion and sediment transport. Pebbles, gravels, and sands carried from upstream glaciers accumulate, are reworked, and eventually deposited in small bars along the river's course. This slow redistribution affects soil fertility, microhabitats, and vegetation patterns. Seasonal monsoons can shift these deposits slightly, but the overall pattern emerges over decades and centuries, producing a landscape that is ever-changing yet stable, dynamic yet patient. Observing these processes encourages one to consider geological time and the patience inherent in natural systems, far beyond the scale of a human life. Even the subtle changes in water color and clarity are instructive. The Bhagirathi's glacier-fed waters are often a pale, icy blue, tinted with fine suspended rock flour, while the Alaknanda's waters carry a slightly darker, sediment-enriched tone. At their meeting, these colors blend gradually, producing gradients and patterns that shift depending on sunlight, flow rate, and suspended materials. These visual phenomena, delicate and slowly changing, are reminders that natural transitions need not be abrupt to be profound. The birth of the Ganga at Devprayag also influences broader ecological systems. Downstream, the merged river provides water for floodplain forests, wetlands, and agricultural terraces. Nutrient distribution, soil moisture, and sediment deposition are all shaped by this initial union, cascading through the larger Ganges basin. The seemingly small and gentle confluence sets the stage for a river that will eventually nourish millions of people, yet the change begins in quiet patience, in the measured blending of two mountain rivers, each with its own story, each moving on its own slow timetable. Devprayag teaches an important lesson about observation and time. To truly witness the river's birth is to accept stillness, to notice the subtle shifts in currents, the slow grinding of stones, the patient layering of sediments, and the seasonal nuances of vegetation and wildlife. There is no sudden revelation, only continuous, gentle transformation. The landscape, the hydrology, and the cultural layers all speak in the same quiet language, that of patience, resilience, and the slow accumulation of change over centuries. The river's journey through Uttarakhand begins with a delicate whisper of movement, as glacial meltwater trickles down steep mountain faces, carrying with it tiny fragments of rock and mineral dust that have been patiently ground by ice over centuries. These early waters follow narrow channels, weaving among boulders and scree, their path dictated by the underlying bedrock and subtle variations in gradient. Over time, these small streams converge into larger channels, their cumulative volume sufficient to carve gentle gullies and eventually more pronounced valleys. Each bend and curve in the river is not accidental but the result of countless interactions between water flow, sediment deposition, and the underlying geology, a slow choreography of nature that unfolds over millennia. As the river descends from the high glacial zones, it encounters mixed forests of pine, deodar, and rhododendron, where the shade and moisture create microclimates for mosses, ferns, and alpine wildflowers. Here, the river is slower, pausing briefly in natural pools formed by boulders, before continuing its descent, and along these pauses, the river deposits fine silt, subtly altering the soil composition along its banks. Small ripples form where water meets these deposits, almost imperceptible but contributing to the shaping of terraces over centuries. Settlements, when they appear, are often carefully placed on these terraces, taking advantage of slightly higher ground to remain above seasonal floodwaters, yet close enough to access the river's gentle flow. The Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, in their descent, occasionally meet tributaries whose waters are tinted differently by sediment types, altitude, and seasonal glacial melt. These tributaries introduce subtle variations in flow speed, temperature, and mineral content, which, over decades and centuries, influence the local ecology. Aquatic plants adapt to slightly changing conditions, while fish species migrate to calmer pools during high flows, creating microhabitats that are delicate yet persistent. The river's course, though appearing static to casual observers, is constantly negotiating with gravity, geology, and climatic patterns, shifting its channels ever so slowly, carving terraces, undercutting banks, and creating meanders that mark centuries of patient interaction. The soundscape of the river is a continuous lullaby, beginning with the faint hiss of melting ice, transitioning into the quiet gurgle of small streams tumbling over stones, and later the gentle roar of the river gaining strength as it descends into deeper valleys. Occasionally, the faintest plop or splash occurs when a pebble dislodges, or a leaf falls into the water, sending ripples that spread slowly across the surface. The air carries subtle mineral scents from upstream glaciers, mingled with earthy aromas from damp soil and decomposing leaves along the banks, creating a sensory tapestry that, while unremarkable to many, is a rich, layered narrative for those who pay attention to slow, natural rhythms. Human settlements along the river's path exhibit a quiet dialogue with the terrain. Villages are positioned on terraces formed by accumulated silt, often with stone walls and pathways that accommodate seasonal changes in water level. Agricultural practices, when present, are influenced by soil composition, moisture retention, and gentle gradients, ensuring that crops are nourished without disrupting the river's patient flow. The placement of footpaths, bridges, and steps demonstrates long-term observation of water behavior, sediment deposition, and occasional landslides, revealing an understanding that landscapes are living entities, shaped continuously by slow, imperceptible forces. Geologically, the river's journey records the ongoing story of the Himalayas' uplift. Each valley carved, each bend negotiated, corresponds to layers of metamorphic and sedimentary rock subjected to tectonic stress over millions of years. Rock falls, minor landslides, and erosion patterns expose these strata, allowing observers to trace the ancient collisions of the Indian and Eurasian plates. Pebbles and cobbles transported by the river bear subtle striations, evidence of glacial grinding far upstream, and their eventual deposition along the banks provides an archive of upstream geological conditions. Even the coloration of sands, ranging from pale quartz to darker mica-rich grains, reflects the complex mineralogical composition of the catchment, slowly revealing the river's silent work over time. The river's seasonal variations contribute further to landscape shaping. During monsoon months, the water swells, carrying increased sediment loads and altering banks slightly, depositing fine silt along floodplains and gently eroding less resistant rock formations. In drier months, flow diminishes, and fine materials settle in calm eddies, allowing seeds to germinate and young vegetation to establish. This slow alternation between high and low flows creates patterns of terraces and alluvial fans that influence where human settlements, forests, and meadows appear. Even minute changes in gradient or channel depth can redirect water over decades, gradually modifying habitats and microclimates along the river's meandering path. Along the riverbanks, the interplay of water, soil, and vegetation creates a mosaic of ecological niches. Riparian plants, such as willows, alders, and sedges, stabilize soils and create shaded areas that moderate temperature and moisture, essential for both aquatic and terrestrial life. Small mammals, birds, and insects exploit these niches, establishing populations that fluctuate gently with the river's seasonal moods. Each interaction, root growth preventing minor erosion, fallen leaves decomposing to enrich the soil, fish feeding on aquatic insects, contributes to an ongoing, nearly imperceptible conversation between biotic and abiotic factors, a slow choreography that forms the river's living edge. Culturally, the river's course has shaped human understanding and settlement patterns in Uttarakhand. Ancient pathways follow terraces and gentle slopes, often tracing older riverbeds, as people moved cautiously to avoid flood-prone zones while staying close enough to access water for drinking, bathing, and agriculture. Temples, shrines, and small hermitages often appear on elevated terraces, their positioning reflecting centuries of observation about water behavior, seasonal swelling, and sediment deposition. Pilgrims and travelers, too, adapted to the river's rhythms, pausing in quiet contemplation where currents swirl or where rocks create natural pools, integrating the slow pace of riverine change into spiritual and cultural practices. The Ganga's early journey also demonstrates hydrological subtleties. Variations in gradient, channel width, and sediment load create zones of faster and slower flow, influencing deposition patterns. Sandbars emerge slowly, reshaping themselves over seasons and decades, while minor meanders form as water negotiates the landscape's subtle contours. The interplay of tributaries adds complexity to this pattern. Small streams contribute cooler, mineral-rich water, while others may carry slightly warmer or more sediment-laden flows. These interactions influence aquatic ecosystems, bank vegetation, and even the distribution of nutrients, producing a dynamic yet unhurried system that requires centuries to achieve stability. Even seemingly mundane features along the river, such as boulders, cobbles, and pebbles, hold stories of time, pressure, and movement. Rocks loosened from cliffs by frost action tumble downstream, occasionally colliding and breaking into smaller fragments, gradually forming rounded shapes that are eventually deposited on banks or within the riverbed. These stones, over decades, become microhabitats for algae, moss, and small invertebrates, integrating into the broader ecosystem. The river, in this way, transforms solid stone into both sculptural forms and ecological substrates, quietly orchestrating the slow evolution of its banks. The sensory experience of the river's journey is defined by subtlety. Sounds of flowing water change in pitch and volume according to the gradient, rock formations, and vegetation. Light filters through overhanging branches, creating dappled reflections that shift with wind and water movement. Occasionally, a leaf or feather drifts across the surface, creating concentric ripples that fade slowly into the current. These small, imperceptible interactions remind observers that the river's power is not in sudden display but in continuous, measured transformation. Through all of this, the river's influence on human settlements remains quietly profound. Agriculture depends on the gentle deposition of nutrient-rich silt, while homes are built with knowledge of erosion patterns and seasonal flooding. Villagers recognize and adapt to subtle changes in water clarity, flow speed, and sediment type, which indicate upstream glacial activity, rainfall, or snowmelt. This continuous dialogue between humans and the river is an extension of the same slow, meticulous forces that shape the land itself: patience, observation, and reverence for time's gentle hand. The river, as it continues its descent through Uttarakhand, demonstrates the intertwined effects of geology, hydrology, ecology, and culture. Every bend, pool, and terrace is a product of millennia of sediment transport, erosion, deposition, and biological interaction. Even the river's temperature variations and mineral composition are crucial in shaping aquatic life and bank vegetation. In this way, the journey from ice to plains is a meditation on patience, a lesson in observing slow, consistent processes that together create landscapes, habitats, and human cultural patterns. The Ganga, flowing with quiet patience from Devprayag onward, carries with it a sense of reverence that has been cultivated over millennia, weaving itself into the spiritual and cultural fabric of the region. In Hindu tradition, the river is not merely a physical entity but a living, divine presence, often personified as the goddess Ganga. Her journey from the glaciers through steep valleys and terraces into the plains is mirrored in countless hymns, prayers, and rituals, each articulating an understanding that water, like life, moves in careful, deliberate measures. Pilgrims and devotees approach her waters with soft, measured steps, immersing themselves in the current in acts of devotion that are as much about patience and quiet reflection as they are about cleansing or spiritual merit. Each ripple, each gentle eddy, is regarded as a vessel of purification, carrying away sins not in dramatic splashes but in persistent, flowing grace. Along the ghats and riverbanks, small temples and shrines punctuate the river's edge, their presence a subtle acknowledgement of the Ganga's sanctity. The construction of these sacred sites reflects a patient dialogue with the environment. Steps are carved into terraces to accommodate seasonal changes in water level, stones are chosen for durability, and structures are oriented to maximize natural light and tranquility. Observers of these rituals may notice that offerings, such as flowers, incense, and small lamps, are placed with gentle precision, floating downstream or resting on the calm surface of pools. This careful, almost ceremonial arrangement mirrors the slow, continuous shaping of the river itself, sediments settling in bars, banks shifting imperceptibly over years, and currents intertwining in quiet patterns. Legends surrounding the Ganga trace her descent from the heavens to the mountains, describing her initial temper and subsequent gentle acceptance of earthly challenges. Stories tell of her powerful, sky-born flow moderated by Lord Shiva, who absorbs her initial energy within his matted hair, allowing her to descend safely to the valleys below. These myths are not only poetic but instructive, guiding devotees in understanding the river's physical behavior, the rapid glacial melt, the narrowing of channels, and the gentle widening of terraces downstream all find reflections in narrative. Every ritual, every chant, and every act of devotion along the river acknowledges this interplay between divine story and natural process, highlighting a cultural attentiveness to slow transformation and subtle movement. Festival days along the Ganga exemplify the slow accumulation of devotion into observable communal practices. During events such as Ganga Dussehra, thousands of pilgrims gather along carefully chosen ghats, performing rituals at dawn when the water is coolest and calmest, allowing for the soft placement of offerings without disturbing sediment or aquatic life. Priests guide devotees in precise motions, dipping their hands in water, sprinkling it gently over themselves, or offering flowers with mindful care. Each act is carried out with an awareness that the river's sanctity is maintained not by haste or spectacle but by measured, repeated, patient engagement. The Ganga's flow becomes a backdrop for devotion that is rhythmic, predictable, and harmonized with natural cycles. Alongside spiritual practice, the river also informs local folklore and storytelling traditions. Tales describe the journey of the river's waters through treacherous mountains, sacred groves, and humble villages, illustrating that even the divine follows natural contours and obstacles, adjusting its pace and course with patience and care. Oral traditions emphasize the importance of observing and respecting the river's rhythms, noting that human intervention, damming, diversion, or pollution, can disrupt delicate ecological and spiritual balances. Villagers, pilgrims, and travelers learn from these stories, internalizing the quiet lessons of observation, reverence, and patience. Even small gestures, such as leaving pebbles on a bank or planting trees along the ghat, are framed as slow, careful contributions to a sacred, ongoing process. The ecological awareness embedded in Hindu devotion to the Ganga is also notable. Pilgrims recognize the need to preserve water quality, protect riverbank vegetation, and maintain the slow, predictable dynamics of sediment transport and aquatic habitats. Fish and invertebrate populations, sensitive to turbidity and temperature, are respected indirectly through the timing of bathing, ceremonial offerings, and ritual washing of clothes. Seasonal festivals are aligned with monsoon and meltwater cycles, ensuring minimal disruption to the river's ecological equilibrium. These practices reflect centuries of empirical observation, transformed into spiritual etiquette, a recognition that devotion must coexist with and honor the patient, continuous work of nature. In artistic expressions, the Ganga's symbolism is equally deliberate and nuanced. Poets and painters depict the river as both gentle and powerful, flowing past terraces, temples, and forests, with her currents carrying not only water but stories, devotion, and memory. Scenes often include subtle shifts in light, shadow, and reflection, conveying a perception of time that is slow, deliberate, and expansive. These artistic renderings emphasize the quiet, continuous presence of the river, where each bend, confluence, and ghat is imbued with spiritual significance. Observers are invited to meditate on both the river's physical characteristics and its layered cultural meanings, merging natural and human rhythms into a cohesive, reflective experience. Architecture along the Ganga similarly demonstrates patience and reverence. Ghats are constructed with durable stones, carefully mortared terraces, and gentle slopes to accommodate seasonal variations in water volume. Temples rise modestly above the banks, positioned with attention to sunlight, prevailing winds, and proximity to the sacred water. The placement of staircases, offering areas, and small shrines reflects long-term observation of river behavior, ensuring that both spiritual and practical needs are met. Human infrastructure along the Ganga demonstrates respect for slow-moving natural processes, reinforcing that cultural continuity depends on harmonizing with the river's gentle, unhurried rhythm. Even the smallest ritual elements, flowers, lamps, or coins, carry significance in this slow devotional practice. Flowers drift downstream, following currents that have been shaped by glacial melt, rainfall, and valley geomorphology. Lamps cast light on water surfaces, their reflections gently shifting with the slightest ripple, reinforcing a meditation on impermanence and change. Coins left in shallow pools are gradually buried in sediment or washed downstream, illustrating the subtle accumulation of material and symbolic acts over time. Observing these minor phenomena provides insight into the meticulous patience underlying human engagement with the river, a continuous interplay of devotion, observation, and quiet adaptation to natural rhythms. The spiritual geography of the Ganga extends far beyond Uttarakhand. Each stretch of river has layers of meaning embedded in local practice, song, and architecture. Pilgrims traveling from the mountains to the plains carry with them not only physical journeys but also spiritual intentions, each stop reinforcing the understanding that sacredness develops through slow, persistent flow. Rituals adapt subtly to seasonal conditions, such as glacial melt in summer or calmer winter currents, and these adaptations reflect an accumulated wisdom about timing, patience, and sensitivity to environmental conditions. Every river bend, terrace, and ghat is an opportunity for slow learning, observation, and reverence. The convergence of spiritual and physical processes at the Ganga encourages reflection on the interdependence of ecology, culture, and belief. Observers learn that devotion is inseparable from the river's natural character, her flow, sediment transport, temperature gradients, and seasonal fluctuations all contribute to the rhythm of worship. Pilgrims internalize these patterns through repeated practice, cultivating patience and attentiveness. They witness that monumental effects, cleansing, nourishment, and transformation, arise not from rapid action but from steady, persistent engagement, mirroring the slow shaping of the river itself. Through all of these interactions, the Ganga becomes both teacher and participant in human life. Her waters, while calming and predictable in flow, carry lessons about continuity, adaptation, and the subtle accumulation of effects over time. Villages, temples, and ghats are arranged in deference to her gentle power, emphasizing the need for observation, respect, and patience. Cultural and religious practices are embedded with ecological wisdom, ensuring that human activity complements rather than disrupts the river's natural processes. Even the simplest acts of devotion, touching the water, floating a flower, or sitting quietly on a bank, participate in an unending, slowly unfolding dialogue between people and the sacred currents that sustain them. The Ganga's role as a spiritual and cultural guide continues into contemporary life, reminding all who approach her that sacredness is found in continuous, careful attention rather than sudden revelation. Rituals, festivals, and daily prayers reinforce the value of patience, persistence, and respect for natural processes. The river's sacredness is both a reflection of its divine personification and a consequence of the slow, deliberate shaping of its path through mountains, valleys, and plains. Observers learn to witness, not to hurry, to participate, not to dominate, to appreciate the slow, unhurried unfolding of natural and spiritual rhythms that together define the river's enduring significance. The river, as it continues its deliberate descent from the mountains into wider valleys and eventually the plains, performs a quiet, persistent service, sustaining life in ways that are so gradual they often go unnoticed. Its waters carry finely ground sediments, rich in minerals, which are deposited along the banks and terraces, slowly enriching the soils with nutrients essential for plant growth. Farmers have learned, over centuries, to recognize these subtle gifts, planting crops in alignment with seasonal flows, timing sowing and harvesting to coincide with the gentle rise and fall of the river's volume. The slow, predictable arrival of silt-laden waters is crucial for maintaining fertility in fields that would otherwise be far less productive, illustrating that the river's nourishment operates not in dramatic bursts but in patient, ongoing increments that accumulate over years. Amid the floodplains and terraces, aquatic ecosystems thrive in delicate balance. Fish, amphibians, and invertebrates inhabit specific microhabitats formed by subtle variations in current, depth, and substrate type. Small riffles with faster currents oxygenate water, supporting species adapted to brisk movement, while deeper pools, sheltered by boulders and overhanging vegetation, offer calm refuges for other organisms. Riparian vegetation, including willows, sedges, and alders, anchors soil against erosion, regulates water temperature through shade, and provides habitat for birds, insects, and mammals. The interdependence of water, soil, plants, and animals forms a quiet, self-reinforcing network, where even minor disturbances, like a seasonal rise in flow or a slight change in sediment deposition, create subtle adjustments, maintaining equilibrium over long stretches of time. Human civilizations along the river have long understood these patterns, integrating them into settlement and agricultural practices. Villages are typically sited on terraces just above the highest seasonal water levels, using natural elevation to avoid destructive floods while remaining close enough to draw water for domestic use, irrigation, and livestock. Stone and earthen walls, carefully constructed, protect against erosion, while small canals and channels distribute water slowly to fields, ensuring gradual saturation rather than abrupt inundation. Water wheels, stepwells, and rudimentary aqueducts, employed over centuries, amplify the river's nourishing effects while maintaining the delicate balance of flow. These human interventions reflect an implicit recognition of the river's patient rhythms. Too much interference could disrupt the natural distribution of nutrients, yet careful guidance enhances the productivity of the land. In forests bordering the river, soil moisture and nutrient availability shape plant communities in subtle ways. Trees and shrubs, rooted in sediment-rich banks, stabilize slopes and prevent minor landslides, while fallen leaves and decaying vegetation replenish the riverbank soil, creating a slow, cyclical exchange of matter between land and water. Small mammals and insects exploit niches created by the river's continuous movement, while birds feed and nest in the interwoven branches of riparian vegetation. Seasonal variations in water level influence breeding and feeding patterns, leading to population dynamics that unfold over years rather than days. Observing these interactions is an exercise in patience, revealing the interconnectedness of all life sustained by the river's measured, deliberate work. The river's contribution to agriculture extends beyond nutrient deposition. Its water supports irrigation systems that allow for multiple cropping cycles in a single year, particularly in the wider valleys and plains where flow rates are more predictable. Farmers channel water gently through earthen or stone-lined ditches, allowing soil to absorb moisture gradually, avoiding both erosion and waterlogging. This careful management ensures that the land remains productive across generations, with the river's slow, methodical supply acting as a stable partner in human subsistence. Even the cultivation of marginal soils benefits from the incremental nourishment provided by periodic flooding and sediment deposition, illustrating a profound, patient interdependence between river and civilization. Beyond immediate agricultural utility, the river plays a critical role in replenishing groundwater reserves. Water percolates slowly through sandy or gravelly banks, gradually recharging aquifers that feed wells and springs, often far from the main channel. These subterranean reservoirs supply consistent water for drinking, irrigation, and livestock, particularly during dry seasons, allowing human and ecological communities to persist in areas that might otherwise experience scarcity. The process is invisible and slow, yet essential, demonstrating that the river's sustenance extends both above and below the surface, quietly shaping life in ways that accumulate over decades and centuries. The river also carries dissolved minerals from the mountains, including calcium, magnesium, and trace elements, which contribute not only to soil fertility but also to the health of aquatic organisms. These nutrients support algal and microbial communities at the base of the food web, which in turn sustain fish populations that are harvested by humans and consumed by wildlife. Slight seasonal variations in mineral concentrations influence reproductive cycles, growth rates, and migration patterns, all operating within a rhythm set by glacial melt, rainfall, and slow changes in topography. This subtle, consistent nourishment of life demonstrates the interconnectedness of geology, hydrology, and ecology, all orchestrated in patient harmony. In settlements along the river, humans rely not only on water quantity but also on quality, and over centuries, local knowledge has evolved to protect it. Sacred groves, riparian buffers, and careful waste management practices mitigate contamination, reflecting a cultural understanding that the river's life-sustaining qualities depend on its slow, continuous purification and replenishment. Even seemingly minor actions, like avoiding sediment disturbance or planting specific riparian species, contribute to maintaining the integrity of the ecosystem. Communities have learned, through observation and tradition, that the river's ability to sustain life is fragile yet resilient, requiring respect for its rhythms rather than aggressive control. The river's influence extends to the shaping of floodplains and terraces, which act as natural storage for excess water during high flows. These terraces allow gradual infiltration into soils, reducing erosion while providing habitat for wetland plants and animals. Over decades and centuries, this slow sculpting produces a mosaic of fertile land, riparian forest, and wetland patches, each supporting specialized species. Birds feed along the edges of inundated areas, amphibians breed in shallow pools, and small mammals exploit the shelter of vegetation. The patterns created by this patient interplay of flow and sediment deposition are essential for maintaining biodiversity, illustrating that the river's nourishment is both physical and ecological, extending far beyond human utility. Even as the river continues toward the plains, its effects on downstream agriculture, fisheries, and settlements are profound. Irrigation channels, canals, and river-fed ponds distribute water slowly across broader regions, allowing crops and communities to flourish in concert with seasonal variations. The river's slow flow ensures that sediment and nutrients are spread across fields incrementally, rather than washed away in a single flood. This measured pace supports long-term productivity, enabling civilizations to thrive in areas that might otherwise remain marginal. Aquatic habitats and wetlands, replenished by regular but gentle flooding, sustain species critical for human consumption, maintaining a quiet cycle of life-sustaining interaction. The river's role as a source of nourishment also carries spiritual and cultural significance, subtly reinforcing human relationships with the environment. Rituals, offerings, and festivals acknowledge the river's contribution to sustenance, reinforcing ecological wisdom embedded within spiritual practice. Communities recognize that preserving water quality, protecting riparian vegetation, and respecting seasonal flows enhances the river's ability to nourish life. Even simple daily practices, such as careful use of water for washing or modest collection of fish, reflect an ongoing, patient negotiation between human needs and the river's natural cycles. Observing the river over time provides insight into the cumulative power of its slow work. Banks shift imperceptibly, terraces accumulate layers of silt, and aquatic species adapt to gradual changes in flow and temperature. Humans, too, respond incrementally, adjusting irrigation techniques, modifying settlement placement, and rotating crops according to subtle environmental feedback. The river's ability to sustain life is not a dramatic, immediate effect but a slow, enduring process, realized fully only over decades, generations, and centuries. It teaches a quiet lesson about persistence, patience, and the profound efficacy of slow, measured action. Even seemingly mundane features along the river, gravel beds, cobbles, and sandbars, contribute to life-sustaining processes. These substrates provide surfaces for algae, moss, and small invertebrates, which are foundational for food webs that support larger fish, birds, and mammals. Over long periods, changes in sediment composition and distribution shape habitats, influence plant colonization, and determine water retention patterns in floodplains. The river, in effect, engineers its own ecosystem, slowly crafting the conditions necessary for both human and ecological communities to persist in harmony with its patient flow. Through all of these mechanisms, the river embodies a profound, quiet continuity, linking mountain meltwater to plains agriculture, aquatic life to terrestrial habitats, and human culture to natural cycles. Its nourishing effects unfold in subtle increments, imperceptible day by day, yet monumental when observed over centuries. Farmers, fishers, and villagers participate in this slow process, relying on the river's predictable rhythms, attuning themselves to its seasonal changes, and respecting the delicate balance of ecological and cultural factors. In this way, the river sustains life not only through water and nutrients but through the patient, cumulative influence of time, motion, and observation. The river carries more than water, it carries memory, whispered slowly through the folds of mountains, valleys, and plains. Along its banks, elders recount tales that have drifted downstream for generations, stories that speak of gods descending from the skies, of pilgrims tracing the water's curves in search of solace, and of communities forming and fading in accordance with the river's quiet will. These oral histories are often subtle in tone, unfolding in measured sentences that allow listeners to absorb not just events but the gentle rhythm of time itself. Each story has layers, heroes, miracles, moral lessons, and reflections on human patience, interwoven with careful observation of nature's rhythms. The river's gentle flow mirrors the cadence of these narratives, reinforcing a perception that life, like water, advances slowly, incrementally shaping people and land alike. In villages perched along terraces above the river, storytellers employ a careful balance of repetition and variation, preserving ancient myths while subtly adapting them to current experiences. Tales of the Ganga descending from the heavens, restrained by Shiva, are recounted alongside anecdotes of local floods or unusually fertile harvests, connecting divine narrative to lived experience. These stories often reference physical features along the river, a boulder where a goddess paused, a deep pool where a saint meditated, or a bend where waters once diverted in extraordinary fashion. The geography becomes part of the narrative, linking myth to tangible locations, and reminding listeners that the river's flow and human memory are intertwined in slow, continuous dialogue. Legends emphasize that the river itself is a participant in history, not merely a witness. The waters of the Ganga are described as selectively preserving the deeds of humans and gods alike. It carries offerings downstream, reshapes landscapes in accordance with divine will, and inspires rituals and poetry that endure across centuries. Even minor events, an especially harsh monsoon, the sudden bloom of a riverside flower, or the migration of fish, are woven into stories as reflections of the river's patience and deliberate influence. Oral traditions thus function as both entertainment and education, guiding communities in understanding ecological rhythms, agricultural cycles, and moral principles embedded in the natural world. Ecological rhythms, agricultural cycles, and moral principles embedded in the natural world. The river appears prominently in classical Sanskrit literature, where poets dedicate verses to its movements, colors, and textures. Descriptions are painstakingly detailed, the shimmering reflection of the sun on early morning ripples, the gradual coalescence of meltwater streams into a singular, meandering current, and the slow deposition of silts along its banks, nourishing forests and fields alike. Writers convey the sacredness of water with a calm, reverent tone, often incorporating philosophical reflections on impermanence, patience, and interconnectedness. Texts such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana reference the Ganga not only as a physical entity but as a moral and spiritual guide, shaping human thought and behavior through its consistent, measured presence. Folk songs and ballads along the river emphasize continuity, often sung slowly during evening gatherings when light fades and the tension is soft. The melodies mimic the gentle undulation of water over stone, with repeated refrains that allow listeners to anticipate and absorb each phrase gradually. Lyrics recount the lives of historical figures, migrations, and natural phenomena, blending them seamlessly with moral reflections. Even the simplest song illustrates the principle that knowledge, memory, and devotion are most effectively transmitted through slow, attentive practice, much like the river's own methodical shaping of the land. In the lives of pilgrims, stories of the river are enacted physically as well as verbally. Journeying along the Ganga, devotees often retrace legendary paths, visiting locations described in myth and oral history. Their movements echo narrative sequences, pauses at sacred pools, offerings at well-known boulders, or chants at narrow gorges where ancient events are said to have occurred. The act of walking, observing, and participating becomes a living extension of the story, linking present experiences with the accumulated memory of generations. The river's current provides a literal and symbolic conduit through which history flows, connecting human actions to the unhurried continuity of nature. Small communities, particularly those at confluences or near notable features, maintain detailed accounts of floods, dry periods, and seasonal shifts, preserving this information orally through ritualized recollection. Elders often instruct younger listeners on interpreting these subtle signs, teaching them when planting or harvesting is optimal, or when it is prudent to move livestock. These pragmatic stories are woven into larger myths, creating layered narratives that merge spiritual reflection with environmental observation. Every tale, even when recounting mundane tasks or local anecdotes, reinforces awareness of the river's consistent but slow shaping of both landscape and society. Artistic depictions of the river's stories, in painting, sculpture, and miniature manuscripts, often emphasize subtle details that might otherwise be overlooked. Each ripple, wavelet, or reflection is represented with patient attention, and figures are depicted interacting gently with water, rather than in dramatic action. Scenes of pilgrims or divine figures illustrate measured motion and deliberate gestures, reinforcing the notion that the river, and by extension life itself, progresses in gradual increments. Visual storytelling complements oral tradition, enhancing communal memory through both observation and imaginative interpretation. Travelers and chroniclers from outside the region have also recorded narratives associated with the Ganga, often noting the consistency of these oral histories across villages and generations. They describe gatherings along the river, where multiple versions of the same story coexist, each adapted to local geography and circumstance. The slow convergence of narratives mirrors the physical convergence of streams, illustrating a form of cultural sedimentation where stories, like sediments, accumulate gently over time, gradually enriching the collective memory and identity of the communities that live alongside the river. The river's stories are not static, they are gently modified to account for changing circumstances. When a landslide alters a bend, when a new settlement arises, or when a bridge is constructed, storytellers integrate these changes into existing legends, creating new layers of meaning without disturbing the foundational elements. This process mirrors ecological adaptation. The river adjusts course subtly, communities adapt incrementally, and myths evolve alongside them, reflecting continuity amidst change. Such careful, deliberate adaptation reinforces the patient, attentive mindset required to engage meaningfully with both nature and tradition. Even in the most casual observations of river life, narrative can be found. Children playing near shallow pools learn the names of fish and birds, often accompanied by local tales explaining their behavior or appearance. Simple anecdotes, why a particular bird nests in a riverside willow, or why a boulder has a peculiar shape, are imbued with cultural and moral significance. These minor stories, repeated over years, form a quiet foundation of understanding, linking young observers to centuries of accumulated knowledge and reinforcing the importance of slow, attentive engagement with the environment. Beyond local communities, the river has inspired broader literary movements, with poets, historians, and philosophers reflecting on its persistent, patient presence. Essays and treatises examine the Ganga's role in shaping social norms, spiritual practices, and ecological awareness. They note the interplay of physical geography with moral philosophy, demonstrating that careful observation of natural processes can yield insights into human behavior and societal organization. Even in academic texts, the rhythm of the river, measured, unhurried, and continuous, serves as both metaphor and guide, illustrating the value of incremental progress, cumulative effect, and persistent attention. In festivals and pilgrimages, storytelling merges seamlessly with ritual. Devotees recount myths while performing acts of devotion, creating a layered experience where narrative, action, and environment are inseparable. Ceremonial offerings, chants, and meditative practices are synchronized with subtle variations in water flow, reflecting the patient, deliberate patterns that define the river's influence. Each participant contributes to a living archive, reinforcing memory and meaning through repeated, slow, and attentive practice. The stories, like the river itself, flow continuously, shaping both landscape and consciousness with a gentle, unhurried hand. Over centuries, the river has maintained continuity of narrative even in the face of social, political, and environmental change. Wars, migrations, and natural disasters have altered communities along the Ganga, yet oral histories, legends, and literary references persist, providing a stable cultural backbone. The Ganga's unchanging presence allows successive generations to anchor their experiences, observations, and moral lessons in a tangible, physical entity that moves slowly but consistently. In this way, the river functions simultaneously as a natural, ecological system and as a carrier of memory, culture, and identity, embodying the unhurried accumulation of life, knowledge, and devotion. The glaciers of Uttarakhand, cradling the nascent Bhagirathi and Alaknanda rivers, exist in a state of delicate equilibrium, shaped over millennia and now observed carefully by scientists and local communities alike. These ice masses, like slow-moving archives of climate history, respond to temperature, snowfall, and subtle shifts in atmospheric moisture. Conservationists study the Gangotri Glacier and its neighboring glaciers with instruments designed to measure melting rates, glacial retreat, and the accumulation of ice, sometimes to the precision of millimeters per day. Small variations, almost imperceptible to casual observation, are crucial, for they signal broader climatic trends that could influence water availability for millions of people downstream. Observing glaciers requires patience, satellite imagery, field expeditions, and repeated measurements across seasons allow researchers to discern patterns that unfold over decades, slowly revealing the glacier's health, behavior, and trajectory. Communities living near the glaciers have developed traditions that, perhaps unwittingly, contribute to preservation. Pilgrimages to Gomukh and Tapovan follow established trails that minimize direct impact on ice and vegetation. Ritual offerings are conducted at designated sites, ensuring that human activity remains concentrated rather than dispersed across fragile terrain. This careful navigation of sacred landscapes reflects an implicit understanding that the glacier's stability is central not only to spiritual practice but also to the continuity of water supply. Local observations of snowpack depth, spring formation, and glacial melt timing have been passed down orally for generations, forming a quiet repository of environmental knowledge that complements modern scientific research. The interplay of cultural tradition and ecological observation represents a form of stewardship that, while subtle, supports the long-term preservation of these high-altitude environments. Environmental monitoring involves meticulous measurement of ice volume, flow velocity, and sediment transport. Stakes inserted into glacial surfaces mark the slow movement of ice, while drones and satellites provide overhead perspectives of crevasses, moraines, and surface melt patterns. These instruments reveal that the glacier's terminus, the point from which water begins its journey as the Bhagirathi, fluctuates slightly with seasonal temperature cycles. Researchers note that even minor shifts in snow accumulation or melting rates can ripple downstream, affecting river discharge, sediment transport, and agricultural patterns. Careful documentation of these changes allows scientists to model future scenarios, providing essential information for both local water management and broader climate adaptation strategies. The patience required to compile, interpret, and validate such data mirrors the glacier's own slow, unhurried transformation. Tourism, while economically beneficial, poses subtle challenges to glacier preservation. Increasing foot traffic, temporary shelters, and improper waste disposal can accelerate local degradation, compact snow, or introduce pollutants that affect meltwater quality. Conservation measures, such as controlled trekking permits, designated campsites, and educational initiatives, have been introduced to mitigate impact. These policies emphasize awareness and gentle engagement, rather than restriction through force, reflecting a philosophy aligned with the glacier's slow rhythms. Visitors are encouraged to move carefully, carry out waste, and respect natural features, fostering an ethic of observation, patience, and non-intrusive interaction that mirrors the unhurried pace of glacial evolution. Climate change introduces long-term, gradual challenges that require continuous monitoring and adaptive responses. Rising temperatures in the Himalayas have been documented to accelerate glacial retreat, reducing ice mass and altering downstream flow regimes. Subtle increases in meltwater during early summer months can precede later shortages in autumn, influencing agriculture, hydropower, and drinking water supply. Scientists measure air and surface temperatures, snow depth, and the composition of glacial ice to detect these patterns, often correlating observations across multiple glaciers to identify regional trends. Each incremental data point, while modest in isolation, contributes to a more complete understanding of the glacier's trajectory, forming a foundation for predictive models that can inform conservation policies and water resource planning. Protected areas and research stations function as quiet bastions of observation and stewardship. Small structures equipped with meteorological instruments, ice-penetrating radar, and water quality sensors allow researchers to conduct year-round measurements with minimal disruption. The stations are often staffed seasonally, as harsh winter conditions preclude continuous human presence, reinforcing the notion that glacier monitoring is inherently episodic and patient. Data collected includes snow density, meltwater flow rates, and debris content, revealing intricate connections between glacial processes and downstream ecosystems. By correlating ice movement with river discharge, researchers gain insight into the glacier's capacity to sustain the Bhagirathi and, ultimately, the Ganga, ensuring that conservation strategies are grounded in precise observation rather than conjecture. Community engagement and policy interventions complement scientific efforts. Local governance structures, often in collaboration with national environmental agencies, establish regulations to control deforestation, grazing, and waste near glacial zones. Educational programs in nearby villages emphasize the glacier's central role in sustaining water supplies, linking everyday practices, such as water use, waste management, and trekking etiquette, to long-term preservation. This form of stewardship is cumulative. Small, consistent actions by many individuals over time contribute to the glacier's continued stability, reinforcing the notion that both natural and social systems progress through patience and measured intervention. Hydrological studies reveal that glacial meltwater contributes not only to the Bhagirathi's flow but also to the formation of wetlands, alpine lakes, and smaller tributary streams. These water bodies provide microhabitats for specialized flora and fauna, many of which are sensitive to temperature fluctuations, sediment load, and chemical composition. Scientists document species distribution, water chemistry, and sediment transport to assess ecological health, observing subtle shifts that may indicate changes in glacial melt patterns. In this way, glacier preservation is intimately tied to biodiversity conservation, Protecting the ice masses ensures that downstream ecosystems continue to benefit from steady, high-quality water flows that have been reliable for millennia. Remote sensing and satellite imagery allow for regional assessment of glacial health over large areas, revealing patterns invisible from ground-level observation. Crevasse development, morainic expansion, and surface albedo are tracked over time, providing indicators of both ice mass balance and potential hazards. Such observations require careful interpretation, as glacial surfaces undergo natural seasonal and annual fluctuations. Scientists cross-reference satellite data with ground measurements to verify accuracy, highlighting the painstaking patience necessary to understand the glacier's subtle dynamics. Through this integration of technology and fieldwork, modern conservation becomes a slow, methodical dialogue with the glacier, respecting its natural rhythms while safeguarding its future. Infrastructure projects, such as hydropower dams or road construction, demand careful planning to avoid disrupting glacial sources. Even minor alterations in sediment flow or local microclimates can have downstream consequences, influencing river discharge, soil fertility, and aquatic habitats. Environmental impact assessments, conducted over multiple years, evaluate cumulative effects, incorporating glacial data, hydrological models, and ecological surveys. This slow, deliberate process ensures that interventions do not inadvertently compromise the very sources they rely upon, reflecting a conservation ethos rooted in patience, foresight, and detailed observation. Scientific collaborations across national and international boundaries enhance understanding and protection of the glacier. Researchers share data on glacial retreat rates, snowpack variability, and river flow, building comprehensive models of the interconnected Himalayan system. Conferences, publications, and workshops allow for the refinement of conservation strategies, translating observations into policies that guide sustainable tourism, resource management, and community engagement. This collaborative process is inherently slow, with findings accumulating over years, mirroring the glacier's own gradual evolution. Knowledge, like ice, forms incrementally, layer by layer, requiring attentive observation and cautious interpretation. Monitoring glacial meltwater chemistry is another layer of preservation. Scientists analyze dissolved ions, sediment load, and microbial content to ensure that water entering the Bhagirathi remains conducive to downstream agriculture, human consumption, and aquatic life. Minor variations in chemical composition can signal changes in glacial structure, pollution, or upstream environmental stressors. By observing these changes slowly and consistently, researchers can detect trends that inform both local management and broader climate adaptation strategies. This meticulous attention to detail underscores the patience inherent in effective glacial stewardship, emphasizing gradual observation over dramatic intervention. Local narratives and spiritual traditions reinforce the imperative of preservation. Communities consider glaciers sacred, believing that disrespect or overexploitation can influence water availability or bring misfortune. Ritual observances, storytelling, and adherence to traditional routes create an ethic of minimal impact, guiding human behavior without the need for coercion. This slow, culturally embedded stewardship aligns naturally with scientific conservation, highlighting that ecological preservation often benefits from the synergy of knowledge systems, each accumulating insight over long stretches of time. Grazing practices are also managed to reduce pressure on sensitive glacial ecosystems. Livestock movements are regulated seasonally to prevent soil compaction near moraines and alpine meadows, which could accelerate erosion or affect snow retention. Seasonal rotation and limits on herd size maintain the delicate balance of alpine vegetation, which in turn stabilizes terrain and influences glacial melt patterns. This quiet, incremental attention to detail illustrates that preserving the glacial birth of rivers is not solely a matter of preventing overt damage but involves sustained, patient management of all interacting elements in the high-altitude landscape. Over decades, conservation success is often measured not in dramatic victories but in subtle, cumulative indicators, stable ice thickness, consistent flow in the Bhagirathi, healthy riparian vegetation, and the presence of native fauna. Each of these outcomes reflects the cumulative effect of patient observation, restrained human activity, and careful ecological management. Preservation is therefore less about immediate results and more about long-term continuity, ensuring that the glacier remains a reliable source of water, ecological stability, and cultural inspiration for generations yet to come. The integration of traditional knowledge, modern science, and patient observation forms the core of efforts to protect the river's origins. Workshops with local elders, educational initiatives for young residents, and participatory monitoring programs enable knowledge to be transmitted slowly and thoroughly. Observers learn to detect subtle changes in snowpack, moraine stability, and spring emergence, cultivating an intimate familiarity with the glacier's rhythms. Over time, this accumulated understanding strengthens the effectiveness of conservation, illustrating that long-term stewardship depends on continuous, gentle attention rather than dramatic interventions. In these ways, the glaciers of Uttarakhand remain both fragile and resilient, shaped over millennia and guided carefully into the future by human awareness, scientific observation, and cultural reverence. Preserving their integrity requires patience, meticulous monitoring, and slow, deliberate action across multiple scales, from individual footsteps along sacred trails to satellite-based assessments spanning kilometers of ice. Every incremental effort contributes to the larger objective of maintaining the river's source, ensuring that the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda continue to flow steadily, carrying nourishment, culture, and memory downstream. The river's origin is thus safeguarded not by haste or force, but by the quiet, consistent application of knowledge, care, and respect for the glacier's unhurried, enduring presence. In this way, the glacier's slow persistence mirrors the gentle rhythm of our own breath, a quiet reminder that even in observation and care, there is space for stillness and reflection. And so, as the river continues its patient journey, and the ice holds its soft, enduring shape, we too can pause, letting our minds wander slowly with the current. If your eyes are closed, if the thoughts are drifting, then my job here is done for today. Thank you for spending this unremarkable moment with me. You have listened to The Sleepy Sloth, where uninteresting things become the softest lullabies.